How many companies have gone broke when the founders couldn't understand the difference between an accrual P&L and a cash P&L?
Brad Thomas is with us today. He is a serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Evercast, and the founder of Cash GPS. Tell us more about your backstory.
Dad owned a shipping company in Chicago. Really inspired me to kind of go out and do my own thing and think for myself. Starting a startup is very difficult. Evercast in those early days shaped me into the entrepreneur that I am now.
I know that was a really dark moment in your founder journey and as you're working and also in your personal life. Was that really the growth under pressure moment for you?
In life, there's a line where you think you're effed, and then there's a line where you're actually effed, right? And once you start passing this first line, it is uncomfortable, but it's amazing how far you can go before you actually are screwed, right? We had to get cash, otherwise we were gonna have to shut the damn thing down, right? Knowing that this was an inevitability, we were talking with investors, and we had this one investor who really loved the product, was like, I'm in. We're like, yes, okay, cool. Signs a subscription agreement. We are waiting on a Thursday morning to get that wire, and the wire is not coming in. And then all of a sudden I get an email, not even a call, an email saying, hey man, I gave it more thought and I'm actually out. I don't want to do it. I lay on the couch, and it was the first time ever in my entrepreneurial career where I actually got physically sick. This was the first time where I was just like, holy crap, we're so far down the road already, and this is what's gonna do it. Like, it's okay to be wrong. And it's okay to disagree. And actually, when you work like that with a team or with peers and stuff like that, it's amazing how your world just opens up so much more, so much more. I'm just thinking to myself, I'm thinking of that book and going, there's always a move to make, always a move to make. We could literally have a 5-hour podcast and I could just talk about all the lessons I've learned just from these last 10 or 11 years.
Welcome to Growth Under Pressure, sponsored by Adapt CFO. I'm your host, Eric Josovitz. Brad Thomas is with us today. He is a serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Evercast, and the founder of Cash GPS, which is a tool that helps small businesses see and manage their cash real time instead of living in spreadsheets. Brad, great to have you here.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Tell us more about your backstory. How did you first get into startups and building products?
Well, first I had to get my head checked out to make sure I was mentally sane because, obviously starting a startup is very difficult, but I owe it to my dad. Dad owned a shipping company in Chicago and, got to see kind of the benefits of having a successful company and, really inspired me to kind of go out and do my own thing and think for myself. And I've always been kind of like the creative person where it's, I like creating new things and seeing how those things interact with people, whether it was, building things as a kid or writing music as a kid. Like, it was always fun to just create stuff and then like see it have some type of positive interaction with other people. So between my dad and just my general creativity kind of got me into the entrepreneur thing. And I'll never forget. So graduated high school when I was 18, that was 1998. So I'm aging myself a little bit, but moved out to Phoenix and, I got a decent job, like right out of high school. I didn't go to college. I started teaching Microsoft classes and all these like networking classes because I was a little bit of a nerd in high school. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, I think I was probably 20 years old and I got a job at this e-learning company doing all their network administration. And I was riding the elevator and I just had this like panic go over me, which was like, oh my God, is this what I'm going to be doing now for the rest of my life until I retire? Like, just go to this cubicle and that's what I'm going to do. And literally, like a day or two after that elevator ride, I ended up putting in my 2 weeks and I decided to go and, start my first company. And that company was interesting because I didn't know anything about business. I mean, I had some wisdom from my dad and everything like that, but for the most part, like I did not know how to do anything, market, accounting, nothing like that. And I'll never forget. So it was a singles website. And I had this idea of creating a service that would leverage Walgreens' passport photo system, because one of the problems that was happening with single sites back in the day is that people would upload pictures of themselves and it wouldn't be the person that, it's kind of happened to us occasionally here and there back in the day, right? Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Yeah. So the idea was to create this service called V Photo, where you could go in and pay like $10 at a Walgreens, and they would take a passport photo of you and kind of like notarize the timestamp. And then they would verify your ID and all that type of stuff. So, long story short, I was able to get a meeting with Walgreens corporate, and that meeting led into another meeting, which led into another meeting. So I'm like 3 meetings deep. I'm 21 years old. I got like tons of ego, and I'm thinking, oh my god, like holy crap, I think this is actually going to work. And I walked out of that third meeting where they were basically on board with it, and I'll never forget going into the parking lot being like, I'm a millionaire. Like, people were telling me this was so hard, and like I just literally pulled this off, and I'm 21 years old, and I'm just celebrating and that type of thing. Well, like 2 days later, I get a call from this one of these high up executives at Walgreens saying, "Hey, love the concept, think it definitely has legs, but our legal team shot it down. They're not comfortable with implementing it into our passport service," and the whole thing got crushed. So, that was like my first real lesson of how, just how disappointing entrepreneurship can be, and that you never want to get too excited about anything, because you never know how things are going to change. And so then I tried, freelancing and doing all sorts of stuff. And, and that basically led me to 2015 when I started this company with a fellow co-founder of mine. We started a company that we had this idea that, okay, well, maybe we could, well, it's actually two co-founders, I'm sorry. And maybe we could create a service that would allow video editors to work remotely with like their directors or their production teams and stuff like that. So we kind of started going down that road. And, sometimes you don't realize that the reason why something doesn't exist is because it can be either expensive or hard to do. And, at the time, Zoom and Meet and then Cisco and all the other video conferencing platforms, their screen sharing sucked, and they couldn't achieve this type of quality that we were looking for. So you could sit with your film editor, let's say, or your visual effects artist, no matter where you are in the world, and just have a really awesome experience. That simply did not exist. Well, it didn't exist because it's actually really hard to make. So we didn't realize that until we started raising capital, over 2016, 2017. It was, raising capital for it along the way, and just realizing, holy crap, like this is a very hard problem to solve. And in 2018, we got our first big client. It was a major Hollywood actor and producer. And I'll let you, there's only a few of them, so I can't really say his name, but he was our first customer. And that started leading to, some more traction. But one of the problems that we were running into is that all the studios that we were going to, everyone seemed to understand the problem we were solving and the values of it. Like, the time savings and the travel, and the fact that, if the director, even if the director's not traveling, let's just say the director lives in Malibu and the film editor is in Burbank, in LA traffic, that one way trip could be an hour to an hour and a half, right? Mm-hmm. So just like the lifestyle benefits of not having to always go into the cutting room with the editor to work on cuts, that's basically what we were trying to sell, is like the lifestyle and the cost savings. But it was the first time I ever realized, the first time I realized as an entrepreneur that just because you have a great idea, it doesn't mean that the market is ready to switch over to that new thing. They actually might be addicted to their own terrible workflow, because just displacing any workflow, it doesn't matter if the current workflow they have is inefficient or more expensive or whatever it is, there is a switching cost to that change, right? Even if it's just a psychological switching cost. So we were like running into this wall where I think we were doing, at the time, like 40 or 50,000 a month, in recurring revenue, with some big people, like some serious people. I mean, we were like the show Chernobyl on HBO, that was all done remotely on our platform, like Godzilla. Wow. And, all these big productions. But, $50,000 a month is not going to keep the lights on for a tech company that's building really expensive, hard to use tech, right? Yeah. So 2 years, I just kept, a Monday, I would leave Phoenix. I would fly to LA. I would spend the whole week there. And a guy who we ended up meeting, who ultimately became another co-founder of ours. His name is Roger Barton. So Roger is a big time film editor in Hollywood, and he wanted to join the mission because our software enabled him to stay home with his family, so he didn't have to travel to Atlanta for 6 months to be on location at Godzilla. And so, after he had that experience with the software, he became an investor and then opened up his Rolodex into Hollywood. And for 2 years, basically, I would leave here on a Monday, fly out to LA. He gave me a room at his house, and I would stay there. And he was just setting up meetings at, Netflix, Paramount, all these large studios, and meeting with all these studio executives and so forth. And, we were we were getting traction, but still just running into this wall of old habits die hard. And then, 2020, COVID hit. And those 2 years of me knocking on doors in LA really paid off, because when COVID hit, I'll never forget the day. It was March 8th. March 8th, driving into the office, roads are empty, don't know what's going on with the virus, going into the office anyway. And we start looking at our inbound emails and our phone calls, and it's just, like hundreds. It was just crazy. And at the time, it was only me, one of my co-founders, and our first employee. It was just the three of us in this office. And literally for the next 2 months, we're basically onboarding hundreds of TV shows and movies, also doing tech support at the same time, while also trying to now hire people to scale right during a pandemic when we have no idea if any of us are going to get sick. So it was a crazy moment. And the craziest thing of all is that none of us got sick, like none of us, which is, really amazing, because at any given moment, if one of us would have gotten sick, we basically would have crumbled in our own success, because there would have been no one to do onboarding, no one to do, support. And, that's basically the beginning of what became known as Evercast. And now Evercast is a, really well-known brand, especially in, Hollywood and like professional advertising, and even in game development too, for example. But, those early days, that basically, Evercast in those early days shaped me into the entrepreneur that I am now. And, we could literally have a 5-hour podcast, and I could just talk about all the lessons I've learned just from these last 10 or 11 years of, working and being at Evercast. And it was an incredible experience. And, you can see I got the trophy behind me, trophies. They got the Emmy and got the Webby. So, never won a trophy in my life. And those are my first two, and totally unexpected, by the way. I didn't even know you could win an Emmy for developing technology for Hollywood. I had no idea. And then the Webby was really cool because, if you don't know anything about the Webby process, it's all voting based. So the vote came down to us and Adobe Illustrator, and everyone voted for us. So that was kind of a cool little, notch on my belt in terms of an accolade, because it was neat that we actually were able, I think it was the creative production category or something like that. But the fact that we were able to beat out Adobe Illustrator and win a Webby was kind of a really cool moment as a founder for myself. But
what a wild
that's kind of like my backstory.
Wow.
And condensed, that's like 20 something years all into 5 minutes, but
yeah.
And that's not, we don't have enough time. No, it's not the end of it. Absolutely.
That's just the beginning. You don't typically get a startup founder that gets an Emmy and a Webby, let alone one award in the film industry, which is incredible. And to your point earlier on being sane, you have to be a little bit insane or nuts to get into this and go through starting your first startup, your first company, it getting shot down, and then immediately jump, not immediately, but going through your career, doing the, contractor work, freelance, and then jumping into another startup, which is a long journey, which that's a huge teaching lesson for entrepreneurs to say, look, just so you better buckle up and get comfortable, because it's going to be a long ride. It's not going to be, most of the successful ones are at least 10 years minimum.
Yeah. I think most successful entrepreneurs range anywhere between their late 30s and into their 40s. And
Hmm.
there's a reason for that. It, again, like you can be the ego, full of piss and vinegar type of entrepreneur in your early 20s, but you just don't have the life experience to understand, like how business works and how to handle extremely stressful situations. You just don't have it. Like it's no amount of education, no matter what school you went to, is going to teach you for those things that just kind of blindside you, and that you have to deal with. I love this. There's a saying which is like, there's known knowns, there's known unknowns, and then there's unknown unknowns, right?
Hmm.
And I use that a lot because, like, as you become more mature as an entrepreneur, there's the known knowns, which are the one things that you just obviously know. And then the more mature you become, it's like, okay, I'm aware of more of the unknowns, right?
Hmm.
I don't know what they are, but I know they're there. And, and some of those things, like, you are aware of what they are, but you don't know yet how to handle them, but you know they're there, right? But if you were a young entrepreneur, you would never even know they're there to begin with. And then you have the unknown unknowns, which are like the real slaps in the face. Like at Evercast, it was the Hollywood strikes, for example. That was an unknown unknown that was very, very painful to go through. But the more mature you get and the more beat up you get, the more you're able to handle those unknown unknowns without, going into a crippling depression and
Yeah,
anxiety.
it's really the school of hard knocks. This
It is.
entrepreneur journey is lessons shape you and lessons teach you who you are. And I
Yeah.
could think about playing football, and I look back now and I'm like, hey, I could have done this, and this differently. But hindsight is such a beast to even think about. It's you really got to focus on what you learned and implement that going forward. And there's some people that talk about, fighting or going,
Yep.
getting knocked down. And if you don't get knocked down, you don't know how to approach that in the future.
No, no. And I'm so, there were so many things, so many bad things that have happened throughout my journey that, like I said, it would take 5 hours for us to go through them all. But in the moment, they are like the worst things, right? But what's crazy is that now that here I am in 2026 and I look back on all those moments, I'm so grateful for them because
Yeah.
they turned me in they turned me into the person I am today, not just as an entrepreneur. It turned me into a different person, And I think through those experiences, one of the best thing that's ever happened to me is that I really did lose my ego, right? I used to be kind of like, I'm Mr. Know-it-all. And, just thinking that I had to be Mr. Know-it-all. That was the first problem,
Mhm.
right? But you don't have to be Mr. Know-it-all to be a good entrepreneur, right? And so, when you have like they call it ego death or whatever you want to call it, but I truly, I don't, I no longer care. I'm more about just creating really good products that serve a purpose and that help people, and less about the money and the outcome and the status. And, like, I don't have a title at Cash GPS. I'm just founder because, I don't need a title. I technically don't even have a title at Evercast. I'm a board member and I'm an advisor. Right.
Mhm.
And I've realized that, like, when you lose your ego, your world just kind of opens up because then you're not afraid to ask for help. You're not, when your ego, you're crushing it. Everything is crushing it, right? But when you don't have ego, it's like, yeah, we're doing okay, but we've got problems, and you're more honest. And I think when you don't let down your ego, what happens is you build up this almost kind of a little bit of a lie about yourself because your ego doesn't want other people to know that, like, okay, yeah, there's shit that's going wrong, right? Uh,
Yeah.
when you don't have that ego and you're more honest with people, it's incredible how less stressful you are. Which is kind of a
Yeah.
piece of advice that I have for a lot of entrepreneurs out there. It's just like, when you're young, it's hard to drop the ego. If you get through it and you're older enough and you're wiser enough, you'll probably lose the ego anyway. But it's just nice when you can just look at life in a different way and not have to always pretend like you're something that you're not.
Yeah. And it seems like the lack of ego or putting ego aside allows you to be more collaborative. It
Oh, big
allows you to
time.
connect with a team and be a part of a family versus you as a dictator. It's
Yeah.
my way, it's Brad's
Oh,
way.
I
You're just
remember
another
that.
team player.
Oh my God. Like, I remember times back in my younger Brad self, right? Where my team used to call, like, we had this company and they would just call it, instead of the company name, they would call it bradthomas.com. right? Because
That's cruel.
I just couldn't help myself, right? Like if I was just fixated on something, I couldn't, like, it had to go my way. Otherwise, I just took it as a personal offense and everyone else was wrong, right? Now, fast forward to present day, Brad, where it's just, I no longer get fixated on things. Still have opinions, but I don't get fixated on them anymore. I'm more open to hearing the other side of why something is good or bad. And when you do that and you let down your ego and you open things up, it's incredible what comes out of that, because you're no longer just trying to prove that you're right. And I think that's the most dangerous, not just as an entrepreneur, but just, I see so many people where it's like they have to be right. And if they're not right, they almost feel like it's a personal attack against their own intelligence or something. But like, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to disagree. And actually, when you work like that with a team or with peers and stuff like that, it's amazing how your world just opens up so much more, you know.
Yeah,
And it took me a long time to learn that. It took me a long time.
yeah, and I think it takes a real man or woman to put that pride aside and be a part of relationship building. And ultimately, I think it's more than just employees. I think it's investors as well. Really,
Absolutely.
like any stakeholder should not be focused on just the end result. They should be focused on the journey, right?
Yep.
Building the relationships, connecting. Like
Yep.
I'm sure you know about investors that want to jump in and control the situation and
Of
make
course.
manipulate things a certain way because they want to get their return on investment. But when you
Definitely.
have investors that are less critical, I mean, holding someone accountable is a different story, but applying humanity and relationship building and just jumping in and trying to lend a hand, I feel like that goes so much further. And
Absolutely.
you know,
And well, that's why too, it's like, be very careful with the investors you bring in, be very careful with advisors you bring in, be very careful with coaches and anyone who maybe in your mind they appear to be elevated at some level, right? Whether it's financially, whether it's intellectually and stuff like that. Because even the smartest freaking people, like legit smart people, can
yeah,
have the wrong answers,
yeah,
and it can literally screw you. That's why, like, a really good entrepreneur is both coachable but also has their own opinion, and
mhm,
it's a balance. Like, one of my business advisors that I've he's been a friend and an advisor for me for, I mean, pretty much since 15 years ago, I think, or so. He's been there for a long time, right? Owned one of the world's largest construction companies. And his biggest thing is that he told me this 15 years ago, where, like, he saw that the most successful entrepreneurs, they don't start off like this, but the most successful entrepreneurs that he's ever invested into or advised they always end up being coachable in the end, where they're coachable to the sense where they're going to listen to you and they're going to take in wisdom from people who have already gone through it, but they run it
mhm,
through a filter. So it's not just like yes, yes, yes. They're not yes people, but they run it through a filter. And I've had friends who've had companies that have taken terrible advice from people who they thought were an expert in their field or something. And that person may have been an expert in their field, but it's shocking how not everything applies. Like, even with you and I and all the experiences that you and I have, and the knowledge that we have, doesn't necessarily mean that knowledge is universal across everything.
it's
You know,
not,
so
it's
so
not.
if I ever, like, advise companies, I do like advising young entrepreneurs and stuff, because it's my way of giving a little bit back to the whole, like, entrepreneurial energy. I always tell them that, take what I say with a grain of salt. I've been through it, and I can tell you what I did and what I learned, but ultimately you need to run it through a filter and make your own decisions, because the last thing you want to
Yeah.
do is listen to a piece of advice that I gave you that you implement just because you think I'm a, successful entrepreneur, and then it doesn't work out for you. Like, don't do that. Bad. Be
Yeah.
coachable, but also think for yourself.
Yeah, I'm reading or finishing up this Psychology of Money book, and the
Oh
guy
yeah,
talks about, yeah, he talks
I know
about
the book.
how he can't give advice like towards the end because everyone is different, and what we want in
Yeah,
our lives is different than what he wants. And I think about that from a founder
yeah,
perspective. The successful founders I know and I've had experience working with, they're all different. They do have a sense of humanity, but they lean on their team. Everyone that I've spoken to that's built, that I've either worked with or just spoken to, that has built a unicorn billion-dollar business, leans on the experts or their team to focus on
100%.
one thing and step back and let them do it and trust them.
That's literally letting go, right? And part of letting
Yeah.
go is dropping the ego. And it's okay. The reason why you're
Yeah.
spending labor is the most expensive thing you're going to pay for as a company owner anyway, right? So why even hire the labor if you're just going to tell them what to do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
find good people and leverage that intellectual web of people and let them go, like, and step back. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's
It
hard.
is. It is. In today's world, it's a little bit unique because you got a lot more fractional and
Mm-hmm.
part-time people that can be an expert in something. You can piecemeal. Whereas back in the day, you'd get one person that was the head of everyone in a startup is like the head of everything. Like that's your title,
Yes.
head of everything.
Yep.
And
And
everyone's
now it's
doing everything.
fractional.
And now it's like a little piece of marketing, a little piece of finance, a little sales, and you can lean on that expertise and really until you can build your team, right? Like
Of
you
course.
eventually want to get people fully vested, but yeah, leaning on
But it's
people's
but it's
guidance is
hard,
so
right?
important.
It's
Yeah.
it's really hard because one, you do have to let go, but on the other hand, I mean, it's just so easy. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I've hired and we've had to let go that interviewed really well and seemed to be like they were on top of their game, and then they get into your company and they don't match, they don't mix with the culture, or they maybe oversold their experience or that type of thing.
Hmm.
I used to be highly against hiring family and friends in any of my companies, and my opinion on that actually has completely changed. I would, if someone comes to me that is highly recommended, even if they're not the most experienced person, I nowadays would probably go more towards hiring someone like that because, you can, I mean, how long does it take for you to find out that someone is not a good team member, right? It can take months. And the one thing you can't get
Yeah.
back in business for sure is time. In life in general, it's time, right? So if someone is highly recommended to me by someone that I deeply trust, I mean, I look for that and I welcome that nowadays. And even if like I said, even if it's a family or friend, which I used to never do, I've changed my opinion on that because now it's just, I can't tell you how many people, contractors and employees, where it's just like, oh my God, this person, I'm not even, especially like contractors, for example. There's certain contractors that I've hired in the past where it's like, how do you even like make money? Don't people eventually discover that you're kind of a fraud? Like
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
I had one
Yeah.
guy, this is long ago. I mean, this is actually before Evercast, where we hired this guy to do, I think it was DevOps. And the guy literally worked for us for 6 months, and he was a high paid contractor, and he did no DevOps work. But he was really good at just making it seem like he was doing DevOps work, and he never did any DevOps work. So it was like, it cost us like $100,000. And in the end, he actually never delivered anything, like
Wow.
nothing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so
Yeah.
letting go is hard. But that's why you have to do your best to really try to find good people. And it can be very, very hard. And when you do find good people, for the love of God, just make sure you take care of them.
Absolutely.
Because,
Yeah.
it's really hard to come by.
It is. Loyalty is fleeting these days in the
Yeah.
US specifically. I think across the world, there's a lot of countries where loyalty is still at its core. You can get some really trustworthy people, but I have found hiring in the US to be very difficult these days. And that's the thing. Like you're able to lean on your referrals, on those people that family, friends, because the other side is that you're going to try to hire someone and they're going to do terrible work. They're going to,
Yep.
it may not be that they're overcharging you, but they could be running through three full-time jobs.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I know a guy
And
that,
I think that's part of our culture now. It's the unfortunate part of the American culture. Like back when my grandpa, he worked at a major accounting firm, and he worked his way up, and he had longevity and stuff. And nowadays it just seems like everyone is pretty much unhappy with their job in the US for the most part, right? And everyone is just there to get a paycheck. And if another opportunity comes up, they bounce. So there, the loyalty kind of works. It works both ways. The
Yeah.
employees, the person's not willing to give the company the loyalty because they know that the company is just looking at them as a dispensable unit,
Hmm.
dollar figure. And I think that is, in a way, really kind of hurt just the overall work culture of America. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate.
Isn't it because of the Instagram or the social media lifestyle that they're all chasing?
Yeah,
They're like, this is what I'm gonna get. I'm gonna have
yeah.
this like fast and quick win here and there, and I'm gonna be wealthy, driving a Ferrari and
I
flying
think
on private jets.
I think it's both. I think for the younger generation, it's this false sense of reality, 100%. It's the little snapshots in Instagram, little reels, the video clips and stuff like that that create this false. It's not real. It's not real reality. Yes, some people do win the lotto. That
Yeah,
does
yeah,
happen. Some people, does happen, right? But most of the time it doesn't happen. But social media just paints this picture that, you can just do Amazon drop shipping and become a multimillionaire
yeah,
overnight and that type of thing, right? So I think the younger generation is plagued by social media. And don't even get me started with social media because I will just go on a tangent that,
yeah,
if it was social media is like one of those like double-edged swords, right? And in many ways, it has been this gift to humanity where now really, really bad shit can't be covered up, which is awesome, right? But on the flip side of it, it also now everyone has an opinion and everyone can basically create this image of themselves that isn't real, which really has a lot of downstream negative side effects. And that's really, I feel really bad for them. And now, as far as people who are older, where it's not social media, I really do think it's like terrible company cultures. I think many companies are just terrible at creating culture. And it starts with like really good management. I just see so many my friends and like my wife, and I've just seen so many people work for companies where the company doesn't realize the impact that a bad manager can have downstream on everyone below them, right? It just takes one
yeah,
person, by the way, one person just to ruin the culture for the entire company. And I think that's a problem because, what's really interesting is that there was a study done that says something like, yes, people want to get paid a livable wage, a good wage, and that type of thing. But what's actually more important to a person than just how much they make is actually like the culture and
lifestyle.
how lifestyle. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't tell you how many studies I've seen where it's like employees would rather get kudos in a steak dinner, from just being awarded for something, just like recognized, right? They're being recognized. There you go. They're being
Hmm.
recognized for something versus even getting a pay raise, right? So I think, and then companies are so driven by the bottom line that you should be driven by the bottom line because that's how your company runs, right? But but you have to also balance that because if you're only looking at the bottom line, then that just also leads to so many negative things. So companies don't. A lot of companies, not all, of course, but a lot of companies just don't do a good enough job at striking this balance between bottom line and culture.
Yeah.
And I think because of social media and the whole culture thing, you have a working population, like I said, that is just looking for the next best opportunity. That's it.
Yeah, it's scary. And there's a lot of shifting in the way we do work and
Yeah. Oh
have
yeah.
businesses. And there's some that have amazing culture. And we really focus, Adapt CFO, the company that I built about 8 years ago, we really focus on culture. And it's really important to invest back. Some people, the ones that really recognize that, some people they say that culture is the biggest department or it should be the biggest.
Yeah.
um, uh, Maybe it's not spend, but it's the level of focus that you should be looking at because humans that you work with, that's their day to day. And
Yeah. Well, and
um,
great culture doesn't necessarily cost much. Like I said,
yeah,
like it's free to say, hey, you know what? You're awesome. Whatever you just did there, you're a badass. That's free.
yeah,
And
that's
so,
so
like,
true.
good culture doesn't have to mean that you have to have the ping pong table and the kitchen full of the free snacks. That's
Right.
no, 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 no. Good culture is about having management who have a high um, emotional IQ.
Yeah,
That's
that's
really
it.
what it is. It's emotional IQ. Like, if you have management team that has a real high emotional IQ, it does not cost you much to have a killer culture. And when you have a killer culture, people feel super motivated to get up in the morning, even if it's just making sales calls.
Yeah, absolutely. You've built Evercast and now you built Cash GPS. I know you have some really strong leadership with strong emotional IQ. So tell me how
Yeah.
you're building that into Cash GPS and what you're doing these days in
So
Scottsdale.
honestly, right now, Cash GPS has just been a side project between me and two other guys for the last 3 years. The reason why it was actually so, going back to my past, right? Tracking cash flow has been one of the most difficult things I've ever had to deal with because mainly most of the time I've never had cash. I've always been broke, right? Which means like every penny is like super, super critical. So, leading up to basically it was around 2018. So my dad, who I mentioned earlier in the podcast, my dad was the reason I became an entrepreneur, a huge influence in my life. And in 2018, his company, which at the time I think was operating for at least 30 years or so, whatever it was,
Hmm.
he literally lost track of his cash flow. And that resulted in him becoming deeply depressed. And then he ended up trying to take his own life. So he fortunately didn't succeed at it. And while he was in the hospital, I went back to Chicago for a few weeks. And because I was so used to being the struggling entrepreneur, I dove into his books and talked with his team. And over the course of like 3 weeks, cleaned everything up, got a clear visibility into his cash flow situation, called a few vendors. They were totally cool. And long story short, got the company through that situation. And now, 7 years later or whatever, they're still each year is like better than their next year. So it has a really positive outcome. But it was when he was in the hospital. And just one night I was reflecting on, oh my God, like I might lose my dad here and my role model. And also too, just reflecting on my own life and how difficult it is to track cash flow and always using spreadsheets and that type of thing. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do it. So I committed to myself that year that one day I would just build a tool that was built from the perspective, not from an accountant's perspective, but from someone who is just an owner operator like me and the millions of other owner operators out there. So that led to 3 years ago where, it was actually during the Hollywood strikes of all
Hmm.
things. And the spreadsheet just was no longer an option. Like it was just getting ridiculous. Updating. I mean, it was like day to day, man. Like just day to day. Oh my God, are we going to survive? Like our CEO and me and a bunch of other guys just getting together, trying to see what we can do. We had to lay off a few people. It was a friggin' nightmare. But I ended up bringing in one developer, pay for it myself out of my own pocket to develop what I called version one of the software. And it was just a real basic tool that didn't even connect to the banks yet. It was just but it was already better than the spreadsheet, right? And then it just so happened that a guy who was the first product manager at Evercast back in 2015, the company that we hired to build the software back then, he was the product manager that they assigned to us. He ended up leaving that company and then started his own software development company. And him and I reconnected about 3 years ago, and I showed him version one, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm thinking about kind of building this second version of this because it's been so useful to me. And he's like, oh my God, I've got cash flow problems too, tracking cash flow. And that conversation led into this kind of just self-funded experiment over the course of 2 years. And I've been using it at Evercast. There's a few other companies that I've been using it at other, at their own companies, a few other people using it at their own companies. And that kind of led me and this guy to be like, what if we just rebuilt version two into version three, which is like a go-to-market ready product, and kind of like make it our, like, he's got his own success with his software development company, and obviously I got Evercast, but like, what if we could just release this product and have it be this tool that is not super expensive, but so valuable, uh, easy, just like the amount of money that we're going to end up charging for it, whatever that number is. We don't even have a number for it yet, but whatever that number is, the value you're going to be getting from this software is just 10 times what it costs, 10 times. And now here we are present day. And it's just, I'm still using it every day at Evercast. I use it every day personally. Got a bunch of companies that are already experimenting with it. And, for me, I know that cash flow is a major problem with so many companies. I mean, I think it's like the stat that we read recently was that so there's 30 million businesses just in the US alone, like all businesses, and it's something like 19 or 20 million of them are sitting on 30 days or less of cash reserves. So daily cash flow tracking, is literally one of the most important things you can do as an entrepreneur. And oh, by the way, what are the cool things that's happened with some of the companies that are currently using the software is that they'll come back to me and say like, I feel like I'm a better entrepreneur because I am now using your platform and I have a more intimate relationship with my cash than I did
Mhm.
when I was just like either not doing it or doing it on a spreadsheet. So, if this is, at Evercast, for example, to me, it wasn't the success of Evercast that was the most rewarding thing. The biggest reward for me was like the amount of people it impacted both in the industry during COVID. I mean, the number of thousands of jobs, right, that were saved because our software allowed the show to go on, so to
Yeah.
speak. That was so friggin' rewarding, knowing that like me and my founders and my team played a massive role in not only the show going on, but then just thinking about the billions of people around the world who were stuck at home and their only sense of normalcy was like the next Netflix show or Paramount or whatever. And like the fact that we played a major role in making that happen, that was hands down the most rewarding thing for me. And so when I look at like Cash GPS, like I said, it's just purely a side project right now, right? I look at it as if this tool can have the same impact on others as it has had on me, and I built it for myself and and my business partner, right? We built it for ourselves. Um, and I think sometimes the best products are the ones where the people who are starting it are solving their own problem, right? But
Mhm.
if it can have the same impact on millions of entrepreneurs out there in the world the same way it did on us, like to me that will be the most rewarding thing, because like I said earlier, there is nothing better than when something that used to exist in your head, something that never existed before, and now it becomes something that is having a positive impact on people. That is literally why I wake up every day and want to be an entrepreneur, because it's so addicting. Nothing makes me happier knowing that, like even with Evercast, like even to this day, with the amount of productions and stuff that still use it, I know that it's having such a impactful it's such an impactful piece of a part of someone's life in the industry, because the director doesn't have to always go into the studio or doesn't have to travel, or the editor can stay at home for a day and doesn't have to, like, that to me is the most rewarding thing about when you create a product that actually sticks.
It's so important to be a mission-driven founder, and Cash GPS is going to solve that for a lot of business. I can't wait to see the charts where it shows the correlation between when you release the product and the businesses not going out of business, because I
Oh, I know
can't,
it's going to help. I'm
I,
100% sure it's going to help. Yes.
it's great. And you've already showed me the product. It looks awesome. And my original thought was that it would be a lot of manual work to have this on top of a QuickBooks or a Zero,
Right.
which I'm not. Let me just say I'm not a huge fan of Zero for small businesses. Maybe
Yeah.
for tiny ones.
Yeah. I've used them all.
But I fully endorse QuickBooks Online, and to have this side by side, they don't have any cash tools out there that show it
No.
in real time. It's all back of the napkin math. It's
Yep.
manual work, and I really like how you guys are doing it with all the automations in play, because it is
Yep.
machine learning, and and it's straightforward. It's like, how can a CEO have back of the napkin math with AI built into the tool? And it looks really good.
Well, and also too, it's like, the cool thing is that I purposely built it because QuickBooks for me, I mean, I'm good at QuickBooks. I've had to become good at QuickBooks. I'm not a CFO though, right? Like I'm better than your average
Yeah,
founder
we're
when it
hiring.
comes to
So
business. Yeah, yeah,
come
yeah.
on.
Maybe I'll take a fractional spot at Adapt. But for me, it's like the way we built Cash GPS was to be actually completely disconnected from QuickBooks if you wanted it to be. Like
Hmm.
you can integrate QuickBooks into the platform as much as or little as you want, right? So, like I typically in my companies, I don't even have QuickBooks connected at all to the Cash GPS.
It's just the bank.
It's just the banks, both credit cards and checking accounts, correct? Yes. But for people who, for example, do like their chart of accounts and they want to use those as categorization for when they create their cash flow forecast and stuff like that, by all means, connect QuickBooks and do it. But as we started going around and been having slow conversations with just other people and letting them try it, there is this common thread where it's like I love the fact that it's not so tied to QuickBooks,
Hmm.
and I've been kind of telling people like earlier on, I was always telling people, because my wife would sometimes be like, she'd see a Rocket Money commercial or something and be like, well, isn't that what you guys do? And I'm like, kinda, but like,
No.
just it's kind of like Rocket Money if Rocket Money was on steroids. That's
Yeah.
basically what basically Cash GPS is like Rocket Money on steroids for small business owners. That's literally what it is.
Yeah, it's
And
functional. The thing that a lot of people don't know is that the adjustment from accrual to cash in QuickBooks is not functional at all.
no,
They have not solved that issue. To be a
no,
multi-billion-dollar company and not be able to solve for, and just for context for our viewers, US GAAP is the gold standard for
yep,
accrual-based accounting, which if you're going to be a growing business, you have to be on. And when you're going from accrual to cash, it's all messed up in QuickBooks. So to keep it standalone, I like that. And I think about my days as a senior financial analyst where this, or, a director, a VP of finance, where the CEO would say, hey, Eric, run the cash numbers for me. How are we looking? What's our runway? Yada, yada, yada. And I would pull up Excel, I would pull the
yep,
numbers from the bank, from the credit cards. And frankly, this is a tool that the CEO or COO could use themselves,
a hundred
of course,
percent.
CFOs, but just they could
I,
pull
I
that
I
up every
built
morning.
it exactly. I mean, I built it again. The accountant didn't build it. I built it, and I'm not an accountant.
Yeah,
So I built it to be easy enough for someone like me who just needs a little bit of financial understanding, like not much, just a very little, and you too can use it. It's not complicated at all, and
it's
you
not.
can be. It's since it's so real time. You don't have to like. Yeah, I remember back in the day when I was using spreadsheets, and I'm like, oh god, I got to go update it again, and oh god, I just messed up a formula, and now my cash prediction for the end of the month was actually $20,000 off. You're like no, no. Like the thought of going back to a spreadsheet at this point, after of using the platform now for 3 years basically, um, gives me heart palpitations. Like there's just no way I could do it. No
I'm
way I could do
excited
it.
to
And
see.
well, and also you said accrual versus cash, right? How many companies have gone broke when the founders couldn't understand the difference between an accrual P&L and a cash P&L? Because companies
Most
can
of
look
them don't.
freaking no, they don't. And so, like on an accrual standpoint, a P&L can look fantastic, but on a
Yeah,
cash standpoint, that's why if as like if I was an investor investing in lots of startups and stuff, I wouldn't even ask for the accrual P&L. I'd be like,
yeah,
either show me your cash P&L or just connect cash GPS
yeah.
and let me see it for myself, because it's very, accrual is just one of those things. I've seen so many companies do it, and cash don't lie. Cash
It
tells the truth.
it doesn't. And as a finance guy, a lot of our clients, they just want to see the cash flow, and frankly they want to create like their own hybrid. When you start throwing in bookings of
Yeah,
deals closed, you have cash, then you have accrual, and then if you close a deal that's at the end of the month, well, it doesn't get accrued in that month, but guess what, you may not even collect on the cash until
that's
later.
right.
So
That's right.
there's really three buckets, and it gets complicated. I think the easy way, to your point, is to get something like Cash GPS. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it
Well,
because it's at a really good place right now, but you're
Well, we
only
also
just beginning.
when we started building it, we literally went down the road of building in parallel a mobile app experiences at the same time, right? And
That's
the
right.
reason why we wanted to do that is because it's one thing if you're just staying on top of it from a desktop experience, right? But it's another thing when your phone, which is always in your pocket, is letting certain aspects of your cash flow instantly, right? It's like always engaging you back into being a part of your cash. And when you are in the know about your cash, it is so enlightening, and it's honestly just a massive stress reliever. Because I always tell so many small companies that I've talked to, right? I always tell them that it doesn't really matter actually whether you do or don't have enough cash in the future. What matters is that you 100% know, because when you know, you
Yeah.
can take action. And so as a startup where things can be not just startup, just small business in general, when there's no guarantees that you're going to have the same amount of money come in next month that you did this month, it is so important that you can make quick decisions on the fly and feel confident about those decisions. And if you don't have that ability, it's almost like you're driving a boat, right? And if you don't have that ability to maneuver quickly, it can I mean, I've seen it destroy. It almost destroyed my dad. Like literally, I saw it, but not just him. I've seen it happen with many entrepreneurs. And so giving him a tool that's kind of like this real-time thing that you can drive, and easily, and you're always engaged with it on your cell phone, because it's constantly saying, hey, Eric, there's something going on here. You need to check it out. Is just immensely valuable, at least to me. We'll find out. To me, it's of the top 5 apps that I use every day in my professional life and personal life, the tool that we created is one of those top 5.
I think so. Well, it's funny you say that about, knowing where your cash is going to be, because that's a question that I always set people up with. It's like an easy win for me in sales. It's like, do you know where your cash is going to be in 6 months? Yeah. Our clients do. They know what the forecast looks like, and they know exactly, based on the trajectory of the business and operations, sure, and all of it, what the ending cash is going to say in June of 2026. Now, yep, I'm 100% on board from a finance perspective, and it's really enlightening to hear that you're building this with your dad in mind and all of the other, yeah, people. And thank you for sharing about him. I know that was a really dark moment in your founder journey, and as you're working, yeah, and also in your personal life. Was that really the growth under pressure moment for you? Or, tell me a little bit about where you went from there, and if there's something else that you want to talk about, please do. But
growth under pressure is I think last time we talked, we were talking about the like the Hard Thing About Hard Things book,
yeah,
which if any of you haven't read it, I would highly recommend reading it or listening to it on Audible. It's by Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz. And so in the book, there's all these great little one-liners, right? And one of the one-liners that he has is, there's always a move to make. And so I'll never forget. So I read this book, and I read it at the perfect time, because after I got done reading it, I always tell and joke with people that, like, in life, there's a line where you think you're effed, and then there's a line where you're actually effed, right? But it's amazing how, even though once you start passing this first line, it is uncomfortable, but it's amazing how far you can go before you actually are screwed, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we were in this position where we hit that second line, and it was like, we had to get cash. Otherwise, we were going to have to shut the damn thing down, right? And so, knowing that this was an inevitability, we were talking with investors, and no one was coming through for us. And so we had this one investor who really loved the product, was like, I'm in. We're like, yes. Okay, cool. Signs a subscription agreement. We are waiting on a Thursday morning to get that wire, and the wire is not coming in. And then all of a sudden I get an email, not even a call, an email saying, hey man, I gave it more thought, and I'm actually out. I don't want to do it. And this is after I got done telling my wife that, okay, we can pay rent again, and we can eat, and, just all this type of stuff. Right. So I lay on the couch, and it was the first time ever in my entrepreneurial career where I actually got physically sick, dizzy. I mean, it was the first time where I've been stressed out before, but this was the first time where I was just like, holy crap, we're so far down the road already, and this is what's gonna do it. Right. And as I'm laying there with my dog on my chest, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm thinking of that book and going, there's always a move to make, always a move to make. And the last move I could think of making was one of our largest investors at the time, who traveled between San Diego and Phoenix quite a bit. Well, it was the summertime, so typically he was always in San Diego for the nicer weather. I call him up, and by the way, this guy said no to me 2 months earlier. So I call him up, and it just so happens that he is in town for a doctor's appointment, I think. And so I'm like, can I come over? I got to talk to you. And he said, yes. So I drove over to his house. And that, by the way, that drive, which it was maybe a 10-minute drive, was the longest 10-minute drive I've ever taken in my life. It was horrifying, because there's these moments where it's like, you really believe in what you're doing. You have proof that it's actually starting to work, but it could also not work. And you could be taking money from these people knowing that, like, they're never going to see it again. Right. And so there's this like weird mental gymnastics that happens in your head, right? As I'm going to see this guy, knowing that I'm going to be asking him for help, but also like it's a gut check. Like, do I really believe in what I'm creating here, right? So I get to his house. He sees the look on my face, and I go in. And I think at the time we needed $200,000 is what we needed. Like we literally had to get $200,000, otherwise it was over. 2 hours having a conversation with him, and then he looks me in the eyes and he goes, Brad, I am going to do this, and instead of giving you $200,000, I'm going to give you $300,000 because I'm not investing into Evercast. I'm investing into you. I believe in you. I believe in what you're creating here. I believe in your founders. And if you lose the money, I know that you did your best and that I invested into you and not the company. And as he was sitting there taking the picture, as he was sitting there writing the check, I whipped out my phone and I took a picture of him writing the check. And I literally kept that as the wallpaper on my phone for, I think it was 4 or 5 years, as a reminder on, one of the reminders of what I had to go through to get to where I was, in that moment. It was a significant reminder. And I'll share that image with you and you can flash it on the screen if you want. It's a very cool picture. Now he passed away, unfortunately, and, I miss him dearly, but like, that was an intense moment. Intense.
Yeah,
and that, you build callus, right? It's like working out.
Yep. Wow.
So I'll never forget that. And I'll be forever thankful for that. And, and there's others. Like I said, I got so many of these types of stories. It's unbelievable. I mean, like, as a tech founder, you spend so much time making sure the platform is stable. And for 2 weeks, it was perfectly stable. Well, it's no different than like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs going up on stage and all of a sudden the iPhone demo doesn't work as planned, right? Same thing, huge director wants a demo of this thing. He gets into the room and this Evercast just dies.
Oh.
And that like gut, that heart-sinking feeling that you have, it just makes me sweat actually still just thinking about it. But yeah, so I got tons of money stories because, every dollar we've had to raise has always been, obviously very difficult and that type of thing. And then so many stories of customers and and listen, scaling. Oh, here's a quick little thing.
Yeah.
When you're building a tech company, you're always building it to scale, but you don't really know how much it's going to scale until it actually is put under load, right? So when we entered COVID, Evercast we built it to scale, but again, you just don't know. So it was holding on and holding on and holding on. And it was like everything up to customer, I don't know, 700, let's say, like up to customer 700, everything was mostly okay. And then I swear to God, it was like 701, just tipped the whole thing over, right? So not only were we experiencing this insane amount of scale, but then we had to go back and start fixing, especially like the back-end infrastructure. We had to go back and start fixing all of it because it was just literally crumbling down. And it reminded me of a quote that I think it was Elon Musk had this quote where he's like, when you experience that type of scale, you basically have a bus going down the freeway at 60 miles an hour and you have to change out tires while the bus is still moving, right? Mm-hmm. And he's 100% right. That's literally what it felt like. Is like, here we are trying to fix the platform while trying to keep up with the demand. And I'll never forget days. Like at some point we were going out for like an hour or two a day. And that just like, oh my God, this is the next thing that's going to kill us. It's like literally the demand is there and we just can't keep up with it. And I remember watching my DevOps team work on Zoom and for 2 hours, just watching my dream die, or I thought it was going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that unless you're a developer, you don't realize that you get to a certain level of users or clients or customers and your app doesn't work anymore. Or the tool doesn't work.
Whenever I see people get mad at their apps, especially when they're using like free apps on their phone and stuff, and they get super mad because it's not working, I'm like, oh, do you realize what goes into making your experience with that app as seamless as possible? Like there's so much that's going on behind the scenes that people just obviously aren't aware of. But when it's happening and you're involved in it, it's crazy. And nothing is worse than when you hear your DevOps person go, I don't know what's wrong.
That's rough.
I don't know. Like, where do you go with that?
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
different developers for different stages, right? Like a lot of
Yeah,
that early
of
stage
course.
startup phase, you build it
Yeah,
and it's great, but
of
guess
course.
what? There's another couple tools out there, Python and all this code. I
Yes.
won't even try to explain it because I don't know it that you have to go to. But I really
No.
appreciate you sharing those stories. I do know that most of the time when you feel like you're falling off the cliff, you're right at the edge and there's like a wall at the edge
Yes.
of the cliff where
Yeah.
it's like you just need to stand at the edge and feel like you're about to fall off and something's
That's
gonna
where
grab you and
kind
pick
of
you up.
that's where faith comes into place, right? Like
Yeah.
not necessarily like religious faith, just like faith in yourself or faith in what you've created. Like you have to basically take you have to take a leap of faith, right?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you mentioned the wall, right? Again, from that book, Hard Thing About Hard Things, he talks about how when you're race car driving, like NASCAR, the wall is always there, but the drivers are always trained to look straight and just drive, right?
Yeah.
They know the wall is there,
Blinders.
but you got to put the blinders on and drive. And then, so that was another thing I took away from that book, which is like, I know the wall it's always there, right?
Hmm.
And people are like, how do you handle the pressure so well? It's because I have come to peace with the wall.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
know the wall is there. So I'm just going to keep focusing and driving and try not to hit the wall. Because if you look at the wall while you're driving, you tend to veer
Hmm.
towards the wall, right? But if you're just looking straight, yes, you still might end up hitting the wall, but there's a better chance that you won't. And I guess race car drivers are trained to look that way. So I thought that was a great analogy in the book, which is just know the wall is there, but don't fixate on it. Just keep freaking driving.
Yeah, that is a great analogy. You mentioned the times when, you know, just shit was hitting the fan or you
Oh yeah.
weren't sure what was happening.
Oh yeah.
A week or two ago, I had a podcast with someone that was awesome. And all of the podcast guests I've had so far are really good. I've been blessed to have these people on, but it didn't upload. And
Oh my
that
no.
night I
Oh,
was, this was like one of our top five people we've had, and just really solid guy, and
oh,
it would not work. And I was at night, like I kept my computer up, and then
oh.
I was messaging support for Riverside, and the next morning I was looking. I asked ChatGPT, how do I find this, and it was telling me where to look for the video because it was saved locally. Don't worry, I could not find it anywhere on my computer.
Oh,
Support
is
wasn't
that how
was
Riverside works? Is it storing it locally and then uploading it?
supposed to store it locally, and
Oh,
I had an email from support. They weren't available the previous day, and then it was like 7 a.m. I was doing this maybe 6:45 a.m., crack of dawn, and someone responded to me. They were like, "Let me see what I can do." And it was like 5 minutes later, they came back and they said, I did a tweak on my end. It should be uploaded now." It was there.
oh,
I thought it was
oh,
gone.
oh my God. That's what a story though. Like I know exactly. Like that's terrible, and that's a huge flaw. I mean, luckily they recovered it, but
Yeah.
oh God.
But those
Oh,
stories are, what make you allow you to stay in it, have faith.
oh yeah,
You
yeah.
have
And
that.
everyone you overcome makes you. It's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Just gonna have Brett. I'm gonna have you singing in the back of my head when
Perfect.
every time
Perfect.
something like that happens.
Perfect.
So, you know, let me ask you real quick,
Sure.
when you're facing these big decisions, how do you decide what to do and move forward without getting stuck? I know you were physically sick. How now learning from that, how do you move forward without just, being on the couch throwing up?
Um. So one thing led to another thing. Basically, so in I don't know, it was many years ago. I used to belong to a gym, and one of the members at the gym was a famous basketball player named Steve Nash.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah,
yeah, so played for the Phoenix Suns and went to the Lakers, right?
one of
Well,
the best
so
point guards ever.
oh, incredible player, right? So him and I would end up in the steam room sometimes at the right time, and we would just kind of talk. And in the steam room, actually,
That's awesome.
they had a you could shave, like they had these like fogless mirrors in the steam room, so you could shave real nice and easy, right? So one day him and I are standing in our own sinks and we're just shaving together and just kind of having a chat. And I just asked him, I'm like, so, I watched, obviously I'm a Suns fan. I'm like, I see you in these clutch moments where you have to like do a free throw or something, right? And I'm like, how do you mentally prepare yourself for that? And he said something very interesting to me. He goes, at the end of the day, he's like, I got my family, got my friends. He's like, worst case scenario, I miss. So what? I'll have another opportunity down the road to take another shot. So when he said that to me, this is the guy who I've seen take many, you've seen him too, like clutch,
he's one of the best free throw shooters.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when he said that, like at the end of the day, it just doesn't really matter. He's like, it's basketball. Like what matters is my family, my health, that type of thing. Right. That's kind of the way I look at things now, which is just like, you really almost can't take things too seriously. Because, almost like a little bit of a dark side, which is like in 50 years, I'm going to be dead anyway. Like everything that we win or lose at in this life is just not going to matter. I mean, I look at the Rick guy who wrote me that check, right? Very successful investor, entrepreneur and stuff like that. And I used to always kind of give him a little bit of shit because he had this Ferrari and the license plate on the Ferrari was time to enjoy. Except I never saw him enjoy it because he was always busy just managing all the properties he owned and this type of thing. And it's just like all that, it never went with him. It was when he passed away. So everything that like we had a long conversation about this too. And it's just like, I just now realize in my life, I'm 46 years old and like, I just try not to take life so seriously. Like I really try my best to, no matter how stressful I am and no matter what I'm dealing with, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to deal with this. I know the wall's there, or I might be even hitting the wall at some points, right? But I'm just going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it to the best of my ability. And as long as I have my wife and my family and my friends, it's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
You got everything you need.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, if it's not going to work, it's just not going to work. And no matter how much you will it to work, not just in business, just life in general. Like I always explain to people that like life is like a river and it's like you're on a tube and yeah, you can maneuver around some boulders here and there. Right. But at the end of the day, like life is taking you in a direction that you don't know where it's going to end up. And in many ways, it's completely out of your control outside of small maneuvers here and there. And I think that's just kind of the way I get through life now, which is even in the hard moments that this won't kill us. We'll figure out a way out of this. We'll make us stronger. Yes. Yep.
Cue the song. The most successful champions I've seen have been the most forgiving. And you would think the opposite, that I need to be really hard on myself to be this ultra high performer. But when you look at the people that are the most successful and the champions, they're really forgiving and they're understanding of the mistakes they made and they're able to overcome those, learn from them and move on to the next chapter.
Like I said earlier, I am grateful for every mistake that I've made. I look back on and I'm grateful. And Steve Jobs had that really famous speech about connecting the dots, and that the wiser you get, the more you realize that you can start connecting the dots into the future by recognizing the dots that connected in the past. I'm like, everything that worked out, everything that didn't work out, I am very grateful for because I wouldn't be the person I am today. And, I wouldn't be in the position there's just so many things to be grateful for, even for how much bad shit that has happened.
Such a great perspective. Well, let's wrap up real quick with a rapid fire 3-question close.
Sure.
What is one metric or KPI you check every single week without fail? Don't say cash.
I was just gonna
don't say cash. I've heard it a couple times, and you right, give me the second one. I know cash.
I'll give you the second one. So metric. So well, I mean outside of cash, like if we're just talking about like a business metric, I would definitely say really staying on top of your customer acquisition costs, or having a really good understanding of it. Because I think a lot of companies get themselves in a situation where they think they're doing okay, but if they don't have a full understanding of their customer acquisition costs, which is ultimately part of their kind of like their unit economics a little bit, right? But if they don't have an understanding of that, then they don't realize why they're growing and still going broke.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
So So I think if it wasn't cash flow, a very close second would be like really understanding how much it's costing you to acquire a customer, how much that customer is ultimately worth, like the whole LTV, lifetime value thing and stuff like that. I think
Yeah,
like really getting a good understanding of those numbers for your business can just really help you in the long run.
that's great. All right. Um, what is one book, podcast, or speech that you recommend to other founders out there?
I would say like podcast, definitely that the Practical Founder podcast by Greg Head.
Okay.
Um, just a really great, so many successful companies are started without raising massive amounts of money. The podcast isn't about not raising money. It's just about, really like leaning into yourself and bootstrapping as much as possible and raising as little as possible, for the sake of, it helps you. Sometimes when you raise money, it actually it can be a negative thing, right? Because you get too comfortable. It's like you don't have that survival kind of feel, like, oh my God, like
Mhm.
we have to make this deal, otherwise, we're dead kind of a deal. Um, but the podcast just does a really good job of interviewing people who have done more of the practical. He calls it the practical approach, which is, not raising millions upon millions of dollars, and have created, because what happens is that, even if you have a company that's only doing, let's say, 2 million a year, right? But
Mhm.
you own most of the company, and that company ends up selling for, I don't know, 10, 15 million
10.
bucks. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and so I'm definitely, with Evercast, we had to raise a bunch of money, and mainly because the technology was just so cutting edge and so complicated to create and scale. So in a way, it was unavoidable. In Cash GPS, it's a little bit different because, my business partner is a CTO who has developers, so there's that aspect of it. But even then, so like if we even raise capital, it's going to be very little, because I want the product to stand on its own 2 feet as soon as out of the gate as possible, if that's what we choose to do.
Yeah. We're gonna have to do another podcast on fundraising only because we didn't get to
Oh,
talk about
sure.
it too
Oh,
much
yeah.
on this. But I know
Oh,
you got the whole school of hard knocks on fundraising.
oh, I'm happy to dive into another session with you.
Perfect. All right. Last question.
Yeah.
Fill in the sentence for me. A founder under pressure should always.
Uh, a founder under pressure should always, let me think about that a second. A founder under pressure should always know that it's going to be okay.
Excellent. Brad, this was great. Thank you so much for joining me today. Tons of insights. You got a ton of knowledge and really appreciate your time.
Eric, thank you for the invite, man. It's been great knowing you and meeting you.
Likewise. All right. Thanks, Brad.
All right. See you.
That's it for today's episode of Growth Under Pressure. I'm Eric Josovitz from Adapt CFO, and I hope these insights help you tackle your biggest scaling challenges. If you want to help other founders find the show, give us a quick follow or a share. Thanks for listening, and I hope to catch you next time.